Okay, everyone. First of all, we want to thank you for attending this webinar. This is actually the second Biznet Bootcamp webinar. We had some technical snafus last week that prevented the attendees from hearing audio, so we're actually rebroadcasting last week's today. The topic is importing lists into SharpSpring. I believe you are all unmuted or muted for this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to use your questions or chat portion of GoToWebinar to submit questions. We have quite a bit to cover. We try to keep these webinars short and sweet, half-hour in length. So I'm going to hop-scotch through some of this front stuff, and then we will get into the details. Who we are, it's Jerry and Melissa from Biznet. Most of you attendees have probably attended one of our live bootcamp sessions. You know us. If you don't already have our email addresses, they are on the screen. So feel free to post the webinar to follow up with us on any questions. Certainly, anytime during the webinar, if you have any questions in particular, let us know. Relative to who you guys are, as we said, the expectation is your existing clients, you're using SharpSpring, you've attended Bootcamp Live, you're using marketing automation, you might need some follow-up refresher training on some of the particulars. So that's the intent of these webinars. As we said, the Bootcamp webinars, short topics, specific half hours on Thursdays. Like we said, if you have any questions, submit them via the chat or question window, and Alyssa and I will follow up with them. Some of the things we're going to cover today, we have kind of a canned import list. We're going to talk about what you need to have in your file, how you can import it, what you can do once you import a list, and then if time allows, some things you can do after you've got a list within SharpSpring. If anybody's got any questions before we get started, as we said, submit them. If not, I think we'll jump into what we have to do. A couple of things to keep in mind. When you're importing a list into SharpSpring, it must be in a CSV format. CSV stands for comma separated value format. If you use Excel, it's got an export feature for that. Other Google Sheets does, other reputable, recognized, highly used Excel spreadsheet type programs do that. But one thing to keep in mind, especially for SharpSpring, is when you are importing a list, you must have columns for these 4 items. You must have a first name column. Doesn't necessarily have to be called first name, but you must have a column to contain the imported person's first name, a column for their last name, a column for company or their company name, and a column for email address. Where this gets a little tricky is that you don't necessarily have to have all that information for every record. But because of the way it's built, SharpSpring likes to see those columns. It maps those to default fields that it has. This just reinforces what we just talked about. Also, you can have custom fields in your spreadsheet. So if you've got some data you're seeking to gather or to input, and it's not part of the default framework within SharpSpring, you can, on the fly, say, hey, create this as a custom field for me because I need it. These are the custom fields. These were pulled from a help document within SharpSpring. As you can see, they're pretty kind of standard CRM-based stuff. Stuff I kind of call name, rank, and serial number. Depending on your industry and your particular needs and what you want to know about your clients. Some of this data, may not fully capture everything that you want to know about your customers and prospects and clients, but so these are the base fields. Anything you would have in a CSV file beyond this, you would have to bring in as a custom field. So that being said, let's bump out to my desktop here. I'm going to pull up what we're using for our test import file here. So this is an Excel file. As you can see, I've got a first name, last name, company name. I've got an email. One thing to point out, you can see in some of the instances for these people, I've got empty cells here. We've got a couple of, keeping up with our Biznet Bootcamp theme that's color-oriented. We've got a team color column. We actually, trying to be funny and punny, a favorite food column. This is probably maybe a more, realistic custom field you may want to have when you're importing a list. Purchases last year, current customer. You may have other columns that are revenue, company size, that kind of stuff. So I've got this as an Excel file right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it up to my desktop, and I'm just going to save it as a regular CSV, delimited. Depending on the version of Excel you're using, you may have some DOS versions, Mac versions. We've found that this plain vanilla CSV, delimited tends to be the most reliable. So I'm going to save that out. I get these messages from Excel telling me, that CSV is not a totally true compatible Excel format, and I may lose some functionality, but that's okay with me. Given I already did a save as, I don't necessarily want to save this file again. I'm going to say don't save here. So with that in mind also, bear with me here. I'm now going to bump out to SharpSpring into our, bear with me for a moment, I'm going to go out to our Biznet Bootcamp environment, which is where we've done our training. Some of these records may already exist in SharpSpring, but that's okay. So what have I done so far? I generated an Excel spreadsheet. I've got the data in it that I want. I want to bring it into SharpSpring. Where I'm going to go is under Contacts. If you're a salesperson or a full administrator in SharpSpring, you'll see the Contacts and the Sales menus. If somebody is just a marketer, this is kind of a side note, if somebody's just a marketer in your SharpSpring install, they may not see this. So you kind of be a little bit aware about the administrative roles and permissions, which we'll cover in an upcoming session. But I'm going to go to Contacts. I'm going to use this import tool. And when I click that, I get some instructions here. These are essentially what we just kind of covered. Save it as a CSV file. This required fields area talks about what I referenced about you have to have these columns. It's a little bit of a misnomer to say they're required fields. They're more required columns. This lets you know, this area down here, there are some optional fields you can bring into SharpSpring in addition to the custom fields we mentioned. You can bring in what are really lead-based or CRM-based fields. So let's say let's say you're coming off an old traditional Excel-based system, and you've got a whole list of contacts, and you know who that salesperson is for each of those contacts. You could bring that in as what SharpSpring calls a lead owner, and then assign that to the person, that salesperson. You would have to have that salesperson set up in SharpSpring to make that connection, but you could do that. And then you can also, on the fly, import lead status. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to choose my file. I've got this list import CSV we created. I'm going to click open. And then I'm going to click choose the file. Now here's some settings on this screen that this next page that lets you kind of have a little bit more control over what you want to do with these people when you bring them in. Number one is you have the ability to identify whether you want all these people you're bringing in to be part of a brand new list. So let's say you went out, you had a specific campaign, you went out and purchased a list, and it was for your Thanksgiving 2015 campaign. You could say, hey, I bought these people expressly for this use. I want to assign them to a list unto themselves. And you could do this, and then when you brought them in, SharpSpring on the fly would put these people in that specific list. Let's say conversely, you've been running Thanksgiving lists every year for the last 10 years, and you don't demarcate them by year. You just say, hey, you know what, every year I go buy a new list of turkey buyers, and I just want to keep them in a general list. So if you had an existing list, you could click here and then start to type. I don't have a Thanksgiving list here, but you could pick to add these people to a pre-existing list. What I'm going to do is create a new list here and call it October 22nd training. You can also, on a mass level, import leads at a certain status level. By default, if you're unsure, open is the way to go. Unqualified, you know, I don't, to be honest, for a CRM system, I don't know why we'd be importing unqualified leads, but SharpSpring lets you keep lists of vendors and employees and other people like that you maybe won't market to. So potentially you might want to bring them in as unqualified. You could do so here. Contacts exist in the contact manager, but they are by default excluded from outbound marketing efforts out of SharpSpring. So again, that's kind of a, you know, if you just want people to be in there, you could really, that's the status you'd assign to vendors and employees and those kind of people. And then unassigned is almost similar to open, kind of a nebulous status. But really open is the way to bring people in if you're unsure. This next area here asks, how should you handle duplicate leads? And where this comes into play is, let's say, you know, I'm bringing in this list, and I already have people existing in SharpSpring that also exist in my new list that's coming in. And the way SharpSpring identifies somebody as pre-existing or new is based upon email address. Email address in SharpSpring is a unique identifier. It's like almost like a social security number. You know, you cannot have two records in SharpSpring who share an email address. So SharpSpring will look at the email address, what you have existing, and what you're bringing in. And if you're bringing somebody in, this first record, ignore the record completely, says, hey, SharpSpring, I've already got this person here, you're bringing them in, totally disregard them coming in from that spreadsheet. Ignore everything about them. Keep what I have. Update only new information says, hey, I recognize I've got person A already existing, person A is in the spreadsheet, I'm bringing them in, oh, but they have some new information, perhaps a new field, perhaps a new, you know, an updated phone number. What do you want me to do? If you select update only new information, it'll just bring in that new info. So, you know, for example, if the street address wasn't changed, it wouldn't get changed. If conversely you had new columns and new fields and new data, that would be brought in and appended or added to your existing record. Update new and existing essentially says, I don't care what I have currently in SharpSpring. All I care about is what's coming in from that spreadsheet. Bring it all in, overwrite whatever's there, and so totally update it. So it's kind of, you know, you have these options based upon the extent to which you use SharpSpring to manage your contacts in the record, based upon how you might use an outside system, based upon, you know, how you're balancing those two. For example, I have a client who went out, purchased some outside support to have birthday records You know, we exported a list out of SharpSpring, sent it out to this other vendor. They said, hey, we have more accurate birth date record. We're going to give that to you. And then the client, when we did this import, we essentially said update new and existing information because we already had birth date records in SharpSpring. And we were careful in the import file just to contain those fields. First name, last name, email, birth date record. And we wanted to totally overwrite what we had for birth dates because we were pretty comfortable that what we were bringing in was new. So this is the way, too, you can kind of manipulate the degree to which you overwrite information. You know, if you're bringing in a spreadsheet that doesn't contain some data that's already in SharpSpring, then you won't necessarily overwrite what's there. I know that's potentially a little confusing. If anybody's got any questions, as I said, submit them and we'll try to address them or even reach out to us afterwards. This next area lets you, again, on a macro level, assign everybody we're bringing in to a particular campaign. So sticking with my Thanksgiving 2015 analogy, you know, if you had a particular campaign saying, you know, we have Thanksgiving 2015 turkey marketing campaign going, you could say, hey, everybody in here, let's right off the bat on import assign them to a campaign. If you don't have that set up, you don't have to select that. Same thing here. If you want to assign all of these leads to a particular user being somebody within your SharpSpring installation, most likely a salesperson or administrator, you could say, hey, you know what? You know, Tom went out and bought all this list of turkey buyers, and we want to give him credit and assign all of these leads to him. You could do that. And then we'll talk later in some other sessions about what you can do with ownership and those assignments. So you make those early selections, and then down here at the bottom of the import screen, what you see is this left column, this left area, is SharpSpring recognizing the columns that you're bringing in, and over on the right side, you have the ability to, bear with me, I'm moving some GoToWebinar menus here. You have the ability to map those to either existing or not yet existing SharpSpring fields. SharpSpring's pretty intuitive about recognizing, for example, in our spreadsheet, we named our first name column, we just called it first. SharpSpring says, oh, well, we're pretty confident that's the first name, right? That's what we call that in our data. So they kind of automatically match that. You can come in here, and if you wanted to pick a different field to map it to, you could. But they're pretty good about mapping that. Where you have the ability to override is like on fields like this. This isn't a good example because we did this list import last week, but normally this would be, you get a field, attempt to map like this. It would say don't import, and then if you turn that, if you check this make custom field, SharpSpring will then take that data in that column and on the fly create a custom field for you that you can then map. Most instances, you're going to want that to be a custom field because, again, it's lead-based. These are people you're trying to sell your services and your products to. So once we do those mappings, we then click import, and we get prompted for it's a verification screen that comes up. And what they do is they say, hey, this is your imported file. This is what we're going to map it to. And this is an example based upon the first record that you have of how data might get mapped. So you can kind of glance at it and go, yeah, that's first name, that's last name, that's company, that's email, that's color. Yeah, it all looks good. You know, what might happen here is you may find out that, whoa, wait a minute. You know, I don't know, maybe you mismapped some columns and wait, if purchases last year is showing up down here or data's getting mismapped, you could say cancel. You would have to re-walk through that whole path of what I just showed you, but at least it's the way to save yourself from some later grief. So if everything looks good, you click import. Actually, you type confirm that what you see here is good, and then you click import. And SharpSpring will give you this message. These two errors are probably based, well, not probably, they are based on the fact we had some empty fields in the records we were importing. It's not that the records aren't going to be imported, but it's that those fields were empty. And you get some this is kind of a clarification on what those errors were. So after that completes, you can click View List, and we call this our October 27th training list. And what we see here is a list of the members that were brought in from that list. We see their name, we see their email address, their company. This is a note on when they were added. Just to let you know, if you'd rather know specifically, like what date and time, you kind of hover over that entry. You get that little pop-up that shows you specifically. And then, of course, all of these people will exist within the contact manager. Although Sally Ball is part of our list, but if we go to contact manager, and actually, given that all of these people brought in recently, Sally's right there at the top. You can see, all we brought in was her name, her email address, her company. If I go to Life of a Lead, it'll show. She actually was first imported last week, but we updated her today. And then if I go to memberships, I can see that she is indeed part of last week's import, and then also today's imported list. So really, that's the basics of list import. It's a way to do a macro import of a lot of people. Certainly, I'll spend just a second. If you've got some ad hoc people that you want to import, let's say, for example, given that this is my list, let's say Jerry's out talking to someone and he's like, man, I met a guy tonight, got his business card, or wrote down his info. He really, he should be part of this campaign. I could certainly add a lead or add a new contact to this list. I could add somebody to contact manager and then go back in later and reassign them to this list. And conversely, same thing from contact manager. You go to contact manager and we got Orange Julius here. If I realize, hey, he needs to be part of that October 22nd training list, I can easily pick him out, say add to list. This drop-down shows you your most recent used list, but if you want to see all your lists, you click this plus sign. I could then come down, take this list, and ad hoc add him. So those are the kind of the basics of list importing. To summarize, it's got to be a CSV file. It's got to have those at least 4 essential columns. The individual fields for those records can be blank. Even though SharpSpring is an email-based system, you can import people via list who lack an email address. And then conversely, during the import process, you have some options for how you want to add to an existing list or create a new list, or how you want to handle duplicate records, and also assignments to campaigns and owners. So I know we're just about hitting our targeted end time. If anyone's got any questions, by all means submit them. Alyssa's standing by, kind of monitoring the chat and question window. I'm going to give it a look also. Doesn't look like anybody's submitting. As I said, I think we're going to sign off then shortly. If anybody has any feedback, any questions, or you need any particular individual follow-up, by all means give us a holler, and we'll certainly help you. All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you next week.